cute babies that are soft and fluffy and smell like milk, a sweet child who calls me mommy and follows me around, the fruit of love with the person you love. I think there are many couples who work hard on fertility treatments with the hope of having a child. We were supposed to be one of them. Our wish for a child is supposed to be the same. Yet, how did this happen? I'm Nora, a part-time homemaker, turning 35 this year. My husband Kenneth, who is 2 years older than me, and I have been married for 3 years. We met through a volunteer group related to children. I love kids, so I joined in to help, and it was soothing for me. My husband felt the same way, even joking about wanting enough kids to form a baseball team in the future. We talked about many dreams, like how many boys and girls we wanted, what names we'd choose, and even planning to build a house with a swing in the living room. So we introduced each other to our parents soon after we started dating. And a year later, we got married. We were both already over 30 years old, so we thought it would be better to have children sooner if we wanted to have many. And yet, 3 years later, we still had no children. This cycle didn't work out again. Disappointed that the implantation didn't happen this month, I report to my husband.
Oh, I see.
He probably didn't have any expectations anymore. My husband's response was nonchalant. Without any evidence to the contrary, I thought that once I got married, I would have children. But we realized it wasn't that simple in the first year. In the second year, I tried to improve my chances on my own by measuring basal body temperature, creating a menstrual chart, warming my body, and incorporating fertility-enhancing practices. In the third year, I finally mustered the courage to step into the obstetrics and gynecology department. I tried my best, but there was no progress. Or rather, the gynecologist has told me, "There's no issue with your body. That means your husband needs to be tested." Hey, why not go for a test just once?
Nah, I'm fine. I haven't had any issues in my health checkups.
But infertility tests aren't part of regular checkups, right?
But I'm not the one giving birth.
I'm the one giving birth, but the seed is from you, right? Male tests aren't painful, and they're quick.
But it's embarrassing.
I am embarrassed and in pain every time. Suppressing the desire to complain, I try to convince my husband somehow. Since timed intercourse isn't working, I'd like to move on to the next step soon. Because you're going to have enough kids to make a baseball team, right? Can he only say I think it's his male pride, but if he doesn't endure and get tested, we can't move forward. Even if the test results for my husband are bad, I'm prepared to live with it. I want children, but my husband is more important. I wonder if he doesn't know about my thoughts and efforts, or if he's just pretending not to see. Today, like always, my husband ignored my wishes and just played with his phone. And there's one more person who doesn't understand this situation besides my husband.
Still no children.
My mother-in-law, who visited our house on my day off, delivered harsh words as usual. Yes.
It's bad that you're working. You should quit soon.
But the treatment costs money.
If you quit your job, you can do it right away, so you won't need treatment fees, right?
If it were that easy, I would quit my job too.
Change hospitals. You should get tests done at a place with better facilities to find any abnormalities.
Abnormalities, you say? That's quite a statement, isn't it? It presupposes that there's a problem with my body. If you want grandchildren that badly, can you ask Kenneth to get tested too, Mom? I couldn't help but let my true feelings slip due to the constant blame directed at me every single time. My mother-in-law, who dotes on her son, turns into a demonic figure at any slight criticism of her son.
Are you trying to say that my son is the problem?
It's not so much that he's the problem. The doctor is also troubled because without my husband getting tested, they can't determine the treatment plan.
There couldn't possibly be anything wrong with my son. Don't blame my son or the doctors just because you're barren.
Yes, barren.
Feels like it's from another time, doesn't it? I mean, who even uses that word anymore? I understand not wanting to admit the possibility of there being a problem with your precious son. But what kind of thought process is it to conclude that I'm the one at fault? Seriously, that's why I told my son to find a younger wife. My mother-in-law mutters to herself, as if for show. Her reactions are always like this, so I just tune her out. Years of snide remarks have left me numb, in one ear and out the other. Yes, just passing through. Then, it was more of the same for a while. Even though I was the only one going to the hospital, and even after the doctor said timing therapy wouldn't work, I still couldn't get my husband's cooperation. However, despite refusing tests, my husband was proactive about baby making. But at a certain point, even that stopped. Without even that effort, we won't conceive unless the stork physically delivers. But after the long struggle with infertility, I felt a bit relieved. Relieved not to be on edge, disappointed, and frustrated about my cycle. My husband thought it was just a break, so he didn't pay it much mind. But that wasn't the case. I want a divorce. One day, my husband suddenly handed me divorce papers. Why? I was bewildered by the unexpected turn of events. My husband smiled and said, "Because we can't have children." It's not just my problem, is it? If you get tested, maybe we could. That's it. He looked down on me as if I were something dirty. It's not like I'm defective, is it? I'm fed up with being treated like that. No, I just wanted a child with you. I thought you did too. So we tried together as a couple. They say women have high-risk pregnancies at 35, right? Your body can't handle it anymore. How could he say such awful things so easily? Just like his mother. I want children, so I decided to find someone else. Find someone else? My husband says it like it's no big deal, but basically, in everyday terms, divorce, remarriage, or are you saying you've been cheating? Please refrain from using such vulgar language. I've simply chosen a younger woman who can bear children. How cruel. You're the cruel one, aren't you? You broke the promise to have lots of children. I can't deal with infertility treatments anymore. Exactly. Mom? My mother-in-law, who had somehow entered the house, glared at me with the same eyes as my husband. We should have done this from the beginning. I found the next bride myself. Huh? She's a young, cute, and obedient girl. She'll surely become a wonderful wife and have lots of children, unlike you. Certainly, my mother-in-law had always said she wanted a young bride. But who could have imagined they would actually plan to replace me while the marriage was still ongoing? What do they think of me? Are they trying to replace me because I'm broken and can't produce children anymore? As the unbelievable situation began to sink in, the anger I had pushed away began to resurface. I've had enough. All the hopes and dreams I had held on to for the past 3 years were shattered. I hate to think that the pain and suffering of these past 3 years were all for nothing. I don't want children connected to these people by blood. I don't want to sacrifice my precious life for such a man. I understand. I'll agree to the divorce. Biting my trembling lips out of anger, I played the understanding wife. It's good that you're so understanding. But in return, I'll be taking alimony from both you and your mistress. Well, even though you're the one at fault, that's why you can't have children. Mom, it's okay. She'll be living as a single woman from now on, so I should support her financially. That's my proud son. I swiftly pack my bags while my mother-in-law stares at her son, completely captivated, and he's lost in his own self-absorbed world. I'll provide the money, so don't go turning into a stalker of the new wife, okay? I don't want her to get hurt or injured because you're jealous and get violent. How can I be jealous of such a cold man? I understand. Just never show up in front of me again. Well, that's obvious. I thought I might want to catch a glimpse of the new woman who chose a man like this. But as long as he pays me properly, that's fine. Anyway, I wanted to escape from this den of horrors as soon as possible. We only had one discussion about the alimony, but my husband, who was ecstatic to marry a young wife, paid me well. My mother-in-law kept grinning, and my husband's existence was like air, empty until the end. I can't believe I was involved with such a family. Once single again, I applied for a transfer to a new department at work. I was transferred to a location slightly further away in the state. I used up the compensation I received on a trip overseas with friends to leave no regrets. I had been saving money for the child I was supposed to have someday, so I wasn't worried about my future life. It feels good to spend money on myself. I learned that the world is vast and full of enjoyable things, even without a husband or children. Feeling refreshed, I immersed myself in work and hobbies for a while and enjoyed my days. It was during such a time that I met a charming man after a long time. Our hobbies and values matched, and we had similar senses of humor. I couldn't help but have a great time when I was with him. He also had many nieces and nephews whom he adored. He said he would like to have children of his own, but he wouldn't feel lonely if he didn't. His parents also laughed, saying they already had enough grandchildren. 5 years after the divorce, I remarried him. I was 40 at the time, so I had given up on having children. But to my surprise, I found out I was pregnant, and it was twins of all things. My husband, who said he didn't care about the gender, was also overjoyed. In addition to being an older mother, I had twins. Due to pregnancy complications and being bedridden most of the time, my husband and in-laws went out of their way to take care of me. Even though they didn't say it, my parents had been worried about me all along, and they shed tears of joy when I announced my pregnancy. And the twins, a boy and a girl, were safely born. It was reassuring to have my experienced in-laws help with childcare. Parenting was quite challenging, but surrounded by a kind family, I was living happily every day. One day, I went to the largest shopping mall in the area. As I leisurely walked around the shops pushing a large stroller for the twins, I noticed a man staring at me intently. I wonder who he is. An acquaintance, perhaps? Ignoring my suspicious look, the man raised his voice. "Hey, Nora." "Is that you, Kenneth?" It was my ex-husband, whom I had separated from 5 years ago. After the divorce, my ex-husband was a recurring nightmare, but I had completely forgotten about him since becoming pregnant with twins. His face and physique had changed significantly. He had gained a lot of weight and looked very unhealthy. Do you have children?" He stared at the stroller with a bewildered expression. "Weren't you infertile?" This man, he still had the nerve. I told you many times, there was nothing wrong with my body. I'm not as incompetent as your mother says. Huh? Where is that voice coming from? Then I noticed a woman standing next to my ex-husband. In contrast to my overweight ex-husband, she looked like she had lost a lot of weight. From a distance, she seemed to be in her 40s, but upon closer inspection, she seemed to be not even in her 30s yet. There was only one person I could think of. Is this the current wife? Yes. Then, is she the one who you cheated on me with at that time? Huh? Cheated? Wait. The wife looked bewildered, and the ex-husband looked pale. I realized the awkward situation. Oh, so this guy messed up here too. You didn't know this guy was married. I heard he had divorced long before we started dating. His ex-wife left him because she couldn't have children. That's not true. It's because of me, who was trying to conceive. No way. I was introduced to you as her proud single son by your mother. His mother was in on it too. She drove me away for him to remarry you. Hey, enough already. My ex-husband panicked and tried to cover my mouth. I pushed his hand away. You're such a despicable man to blame infertility on your wife and cheat with a young girl. And I continued. But I'm glad you brought up divorce at that time. Even if the cause of infertility was because of you, I was planning to stay by your side forever. Thanks to you, I have these adorable twin babies. Goodbye, then. I smiled at my sleeping child in the stroller, then left as if showing off. Before parting ways, I wrote my phone number on the back of the shopping receipt. Then, I gently held the hand of the absent-minded woman standing nearby. It felt cold, rough, and sadly empty. "It's not your fault." I could tell her thin shoulders trembled as I whispered that in her ear. Later on, it seemed they got divorced. How do I know? Because the woman who used to be my ex-husband's wife told me. She didn't know she was the other woman, nor did she realize there was a chance the house had been sown with seeds of infidelity. Apparently, like me, she had been blamed by her ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law for not being able to have children. The young and earnest woman seemed to have spent even longer than me taking it to heart, but it seems my revelation woke her up. Her parents were furious at the unjust blame placed on their daughter. When her husband was forced to undergo tests at the hospital, it turned out he was almost infertile. The doctor told him that if he had undergone treatment when he was a bit younger, there might have been a chance. Truly, it's too foolish. After she explained the circumstances of their divorce, she apologized to me. She didn't deserve any blame. So I told her she could find happiness by spending her settlement money on enjoyable things just like I did. She's still young, so I'm sure she'll have plenty of good encounters ahead of her. But I can't imagine such luck would come to the worst ex-husband. Not long after breaking up with her, my ex-husband called me out of the blue. He still believed I loved him the most, so he asked if I'd come back. Of course, with the children. He was confident he could love them, if they were mine. He even suggested that there might be traces of his genes left in me from our time together, and that it wouldn't be wrong to say that those children are his. Can't you see it that way? My spine shivers as if frozen. I absolutely don't see it that way. It's really creepy, so spare me. Because your head is in the clouds like that, no children came to you. Understand? You should just spend your whole life looking after the mother who loves scummy men like you. You told me not to get close to the new bride out of jealousy. Remember that? I don't think so. I hung up the phone, ignoring the pathetic voice clinging on. It seems my ex-husband is being belittled by his own mother, called defective or something, but he brought it upon himself. My ex-mother-in-law probably won't ever get to hold the grandchild she so desperately wanted. It's all their fault, just deserts for their actions. Anyway, I'm busy today with childcare and housework for the twins. Come here and look. The kids are standing up on their own. Wait, I'll get the camera ready. Hold on, kids. Mommy's sitting in the car, so wait. Hey, Dad, that's a bit too much, you know. As doting parents, my husband and I are desperate not to miss a moment of our children's growth. Of course, childcare isn't all fun and games. But the moment when my husband smiles proudly at our children, who show us their smiles, is the happiest. What we wanted back then is right here now. May these precious days continue forever and ever.
My husband forced chores and Mil's care on me, said, sign divorce papers and leave. So I left, then got a call from someone.
You want me to help around the house too? You expect me to work both at the office and at home? And you're living comfortably thanks to me? What? What era are you from? I was taken aback. I do appreciate for everything my husband does, but I'm working all day too, taking care of the house and caregiving. And yet... You talking back to me? Write up a divorce paper and get out. I knew it was a bluff. He thought I'd never leave his mother behind. I was at my breaking point. Everything we had built was falling apart. To him, I was just a free maid. No way I'm spending the rest of my life taking care of this man. My name is Molly, 52 years old. My daughter has moved far away, and now it's just my husband Brian, his mother Sarah, who has mobility issues, and me. Brian has become increasingly arrogant with his age. He orders me around like I'm just a maid. Sarah had a stroke and needs help because she can barely move one of her legs. Right now, I help her bathe and use the restroom, but it's just gonna get more challenging from here on out. I'm not fed up or anything, but I do sigh sometimes. When will I ever have time for myself? Molly? Sarah called out. What is it, Sarah? Can I ask for a favor? She looked apologetic. She had trouble with the steps. She could move around inside the house with a cane, but the steps were dangerous for her. I didn't want her to get hurt. All right, on 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, and I'm sorry. Don't mention it. Before her stroke, she was always on the move and very independent. She taught me everything about household chores without a single complaint, despite my poor memory and slow learning. Helping her out when she's in trouble is the least I can do. But last night, I had to help her to the bathroom 3 times. With my menopause, once I wake up, I struggle to get back to sleep and I feel exhausted. When I told Brian about it, he replied indifferently, "Oh, okay." It's about your mother. Don't you have something better to say? What can I say to improve the situation? Just let me know and I'll say it. I was astounded. He's missing the point. I want to have handrails at the entrance and restroom installed for your mom. What? Nah, we don't need them. You're home to help her out, so we don't need them. But they're expensive and an eyesore. Doesn't he realize that he himself might need them someday? Seeing my dissatisfaction, he suggested, "If you're going to complain, why not hire a professional caregiver?" I'm not complaining. Besides, we can't even get caregiver approval. Well, just apply for it then. It's not that easy to get approved. I mean, she can still manage daily activities on her own. Then what's the problem? He has a point there, but that's not what I was getting at. He wasn't like this before, but now he's so self-centered. I guess it's unrealistic to expect sudden empathy from him. It's futile to hope for concern from someone who doesn't even feel for his own mother, despite her difficulties. 3 days later, my fears came true. Sarah tripped and fell, hurting her dominant hand, which made everyday tasks challenging. I had to care for her constantly, yet Brian didn't lift a finger to help. He ignored the mounting dishes and laundry. I wish he'd help, even just temporarily. He has always been hands-off with chores and parenting. He showed no interest in our daughter's school events. He even avoided getting close when she was sick, saying, "Don't give it to me." If I pushed myself too hard and collapsed, it would also cause him trouble. The house would fall into disarray and Sarah would feel guilty. Even if we managed this time, something similar could happen again. It makes more sense to expect that. I mean, we're not getting any younger. We need to support each other moving forward. So, yeah, I'd like you to help with the housework. You don't have to start cooking meals or anything right away, but maybe you could fold the laundry or clean the bathroom? What? You could take out the trash when you go for a walk? He really should have noticed this himself. I wonder why I have to be so humble about it. Still, I asked with a smile. Okay, then you could prepare your own breakfast, maybe just some toast and coffee? Just start with what you can, you know? I felt stupid even asking him this. It was like I was talking to a child. But hey, if it even slightly reduces my workload, it's a win. My husband's face showed dissatisfaction. What exactly is bothering him? How else could I ask him? Just then, he said something unbelievable. Are you kidding me? What? I'm not kidding. You know what's going on, right? You're telling me the one who brings in the money to help with housework. You're just a housewife. How can you be so demanding? Demanding? I resent that. Were you even listening to me? He dramatically held his head and let out a deep sigh. You want me to work both at the office and at home? That's not how I put it. You act like a devil of a wife, living comfortably all thanks to me. His harsh words left me feeling frustrated, thinking that a housewife is somehow inferior. What century is he from? I appreciate that you work, but I work all day too. Whoop-de-doo. Do you really think your housework and caregiving have any value? Yes, I do think they have value. If I weren't doing them, you wouldn't be able to go to work. Anyone could do what you do. You're an amateur, not even a professional. Excuse me? If you still want to talk back, write up a divorce paper and get out. I was speechless. There are things you should and shouldn't say, even when you're angry. Brian smirked, seeing my shock. It seemed he wasn't serious. He was just threatening a stay-at-home wife like me, knowing well I wouldn't abandon his mother. Anger welled up inside me. Fine, I'll do as you wish. Something inside me broke. Everything we had built was falling apart. It seems I've reached my limit. I'm divorcing you. What? I'm going back to my parents' house. What? Hey, I won't allow it. Apologize first. He demanded, but I responded calmly. There's no need to apologize. You told me to leave, right? So you're just gonna abandon my mother just like that? If amateurs like me aren't good enough, why not hire a professional? That's what you suggested. Professionals cost money, you know. There. I was just a free maid to him after all. My feelings for him grew colder and colder. You could do it. After all, it's something anyone can do, right? Well, who do you think you are, showing no compassion or gratitude? Don't push your luck. Huh? What's gotten into you, talking to me like that? He asked with a twisted face, but I didn't respond. No way I'm spending the rest of my life taking care of a man like this. I packed my things and left the house. It's a 2-hour drive to my parents' house. I soon became calm, but worry for Sarah consumed me. Would she be alright without me? I'm worried she might overexert herself with her bad leg. I should have gotten her a cell phone so we could talk directly. Brian had said it was too expensive and unnecessary. What a petty guy he is. I couldn't believe he would actually neglect his own mother. But the regret would be unbearable if something happened to her. But returning home now would just repeat the same cycle. He knows me well and probably thinks I'll come back soon. I can already picture his smug face. It's frustrating. It makes me angry. I pulled over at a convenience store, wondering what to do when my phone rang. Hello? It was a call from someone I saw every day. The content of the call was surprising, but I didn't need time to think it over. Understood. I'll be there right away. Please wait for me. No more doubts. Let's make him truly regret this. Hours later, I found myself in my favorite apron, cooking dinner in the familiar kitchen as usual. Sarah was watching the evening news in the living room, just like always. Brian noticed me, and he yelled out, Hey! What are you doing? What does it look like I'm doing? I'm cooking, making dinner for Sarah. I replied nonchalantly. You came back after all. It was just a few hours away from home. Did you realize your mistake? You must have felt lonely. I just kept cooking in silence. You're a stranger now that we're divorced. You should have apologized to me before coming back. Annoyed by my silence, he grabbed my shoulder and snapped. Are you listening? Calmly, I said, assaulting a stranger is a crime, you know. Then you're guilty of trespassing. I'm here on business. Business? Yes, your mother hired me to do household and caregiving work. What? Is that true, Mom? Sarah explained. I called her and asked for help. Why would you do something like that? She's a stranger now. What are you talking about? You were the one shaken up when she left. No, I wasn't. He stammered, his face turning red. Sarah smirked. Since she's a stranger, I have to pay her properly for her services. What? Pay her? Why was he so surprised? It was his own fault. After I left the house, he told his mother, I won't help you around the house. Think of it as part of your rehab. You need to move around or you will end up bedridden. As expected, he wouldn't actually hire a professional caregiver. Eventually, he declared, I'm tired, and locked himself in his room. That's when she decided to give up on him. It was a wise decision. Then she called me. I don't want to interfere in marital issues, and I'm not against the divorce, Sarah said calmly, without blaming me for leaving. But I am upset by my son's arrogant behavior and his lack of effort. Yes. Molly, can you help me with something? What do you need? I'm thinking it's time to teach him a lesson. You mean to discipline him strictly? Yes. Since her stroke, Sarah had become more reserved, but now she seemed lively for the first time in a while. Perhaps she had been gathering her strength. You must be fed up after all he's said and done. Definitely. Leaving can wait until after you've had your payback. And so I was hired to do household and caregiving work for as long as she felt necessary. The payment would use up all her secret savings. Brian trembled as he protested. That's ridiculous! It's a ripoff! Oh, but that's the amount I decided on, she replied. I nodded in agreement. Mom, she left the house because she couldn't handle the housework and caregiving. Really? I couldn't handle the housework and caregiving? That's rich coming from him. I absolutely will not pay. Well then, since there's no work for me, I'll be leaving. Sarah quickly stopped me. That would be a problem. Then who will do the housework and help me? He couldn't say he would. Of course not. All he does in this house extends to eating the food prepared for him, using the bath drawn for him, and sitting back to complain. Nothing else. Sarah glared at her son. No matter what you say, I want Molly to take care of me. I've given her my savings to use as she sees fit. I'm grateful for that. First, I'll buy a cell phone for you, have handrails installed throughout the house, and I also want to get the caregiving bed you've wished for. No, that's my money, Brian protested vehemently. Sarah then frowned. What did you say? Say it again. I'm saying it's a waste. It's my money that's getting spent. She was speechless with disbelief. What's with your face? I'm only speaking the truth. Her savings were his money? He's like a typical bully who thinks what's yours is his and what's his is his own. He would abandon the caregiving of his mother who raised him, yet claim, it's my money? It's a waste, you said. She repeated in a tone I had never heard from her before. I see how it is. I've been patient because I didn't want to become a nagging old woman, but I've made up my mind. I'm going to speak my mind clearly.
What do you mean, Mom?
You're pathetic.
What?
You have a big attitude and no gratitude towards your family, always thinking everything will go your way. Seeing a grown man flustered by his mother's scolding was indeed pathetic. When did you become such a person?
Calm down, Mom. I haven't changed from the old days.
You might have forgotten, but I haven't.
You haven't forgotten what?
When I was struggling with my tyrannical husband, you were always there to protect and help me. I was happy then, thinking that was the real you. Or was that just an act for the inheritance? 10 years ago, my father-in-law, who has since passed away, was an absolute tyrant. He was the epitome of a stubborn and selfish old-fashioned father. My husband often endured his unreasonable beatings. In his younger days, he even raised his hand to Sarah and would routinely throw and break plates when angry, as if it were nothing. Just thinking about cleaning up after that gives me chills. Since I married into this family, I've been called slow and useless more times than I can count. Brian always hated his father for this and protected us. He used to be kinder back then. His father was even stingier than he is, vowing to take his wealth with him to the grave. We thought it was a joke, but he wrote a spiteful will saying he wouldn't leave a penny to his son because he disliked his defiant attitude. As the eldest son, my husband felt his pride and patience trampled on and was outraged. Of course, he had the right to claim his compulsory share, but it felt odd to demand it from his mother, who lived in the same household. Brian, the property in your mother's name will eventually be yours. You don't have to claim it now. I told him at the time, and that settled it for the moment. I never thought my husband would step into his shoes, given how much he disliked him. He probably wanted the dignity of a family head for a while, got a taste for it, then found it too comfortable. Or maybe it's true what they say about the apple not falling far from the tree. I know you are a kind son, Sarah said. Are you really going to be happy after losing Molly, leaving me bedridden, and then burying me? Seeing the troubled look on his mother's face, my husband was shaken. He looked at me for help, but I didn't soften my stern expression. Now is his chance to change.
Mom, forgive me.
She nodded quietly. That's good. You're still kind, not like your father. He then glanced at me.
Oh, Molly, I'm really sorry,
he said, genuinely apologetic. I was surprised by his honest apology. Does Sarah have some sort of mind control ability? I said. It was shocking to be asked for a divorce. You have family. You can't say such things so easily.
I know. I regret it. I'm glad you came back.
Just don't say it again.
Understood.
I thought to myself that if anyone was going to say it, it should be me, but I kept quiet. Sarah wouldn't easily forgive. Her aim was to make him realize his faults. Afterward, Brian made promises to us. He agreed to take on some household chores and to actively participate in caregiving for his mother. He looked reluctant, but his commitment was secured. If you break your promise, you'll have to leave.
What? I have to leave?
That's right, and I won't let you take anything with you.
All right, I'll keep my promise.
He agreed, humbled for the first time in a long while. No one likes being scolded by their mother, no matter their age. I was briefly relieved. It seemed like the old him was back.
If it gets me the inheritance, it's nothing,
Brian muttered under his breath. I caught every word he said. Maybe expecting him to change his heart was too ambitious so soon. For now, that's fine. He's still in the dark. And he likely will be for many more years. I'll save the real shock for later. There's actually no inheritance left in this house, all thanks to the tyrannical father-in-law. Unbeknownst to my husband, before his father passed away, he wrote in his will that he would leave nothing to his son and then donated all his land to the local government and his savings to the Red Cross without our knowledge. This made the will's contents irrevocable. Sarah tried to intervene, but it was futile. Brian, having not claimed his mandatory share, remains unaware. He thinks all the property was inherited by his mother. When it's finally his turn, he'll find nothing waiting for him. When he discovers the truth, I plan to feign surprise right alongside him. Then, I'll relish the real satisfaction. The thrill is genuine. The savings hidden and safeguarded in the closet by my mother-in-law were handed to me as payment, leaving no inheritance for my husband to anticipate. He'll have to learn to live modestly. Now that he's promised, I hope he keeps up the effort for our family's sake. Anyone can do it, he said, so he should quickly master both housework and caregiving. Learning something new at his age, especially something he has never cared for, will be a challenge. Whenever he tried, he was more of an obstacle than an aid. Breaking dishes, spilling shampoo refills, the list of mishaps is endless. Just the other day, he caused sparks in the microwave and now refuses to use it, claiming it's dangerous. What a foolish man. Finally, he conceded, "I have no talent for this, so I'm stepping down." When I heard this, I said, your father was also a man who couldn't keep his promises, which was troublesome. Come on, don't lump me in with them. Mentioning his father makes him more manageable. It's difficult to teach you. You need to learn faster, you know. Oh, okay. Don't think you can just quit. It's pathetic to give up after just a few days. Think about how long I've been at it. We still have a long way to go. While having the handrails installed, we also updated the floors to eliminate steps and ensure smooth wheelchair access. Use it well, said Sarah, and I paid for it with the money I received. Although he was initially against it, experiencing life as a caregiver has shown him how much easier it is with handrails. Should we also remodel the bathroom? A motorized bed would make things easier, right? Next time, he'll pay. He won't have grounds to complain anymore. Now, after all this, my husband suddenly wants to cancel the divorce. But that's a problem, because the divorce papers were never filed. You can't undo what hasn't been done. We never even wrote it down. I thought it was clear that the divorce hadn't been processed, but the shock of me leaving must have muddled his memory. In my current role, he probably sees me as a live-in employee. But I have no intention of enlightening him. This arrangement suits me better. If I return to the role of his wife, he might start treating me harshly again, like a maid or something owned. I can't let that happen again. I still don't trust this man. Besides, if we were really divorced, what if something happened? I'm not ready to give up my responsibilities or rights. I won't abandon my family. For now, my husband is like an apprentice, still learning. I am the boss. My old-fashioned husband understands hierarchies better. It might take a while, but I'll let you know when you've earned my recognition. It all depends on your efforts.
My mill and husband were fed up with me for not conceiving children, so I got a divorce without telling him I was pregnant.
Mom told me that if you can't have children, then I should get a divorce. All right. Understood. I'm pregnant, though. What? I'm Anna, a housewife in my 30s. I'm currently living with my husband who works as an office worker. I met my husband when I was working at a food company. As we met and talked numerous times as his company's client, I fell for his occasional smiles, and eventually I was the one who asked him out. To that, he first turned me down by saying, "Sorry, I'm happy you feel that way, but I have a girlfriend." But a month later, he approached me saying, "I've broken up with her, so I'd like to go out with you." It seems he started to have feelings for me ever since I confessed, and his girlfriend, suspecting this, had asked him if he had someone else in his mind. When he nodded, she said, "Then let's break up front," and they ended their relationship that way. I felt guilty for breaking up their relationship, but he reassured me with a smile and said, "It wouldn't have lasted long anyway, so don't worry about it." Saved by his words, we dated for a total of 3 years before we got married. At that time, he said, "I want children after we get married, so could you stay home to take care of us and the kids?" Back then, I didn't like my stressful job and didn't want to continue working there. So as my husband suggested, I quit my job and chose the path of a full-time housewife. I decided to support my husband. Becoming a housewife all of a sudden after working was quite challenging, but I wasn't bothered because our married life was going smoothly and I was at the peak of happiness. Every day was joyful and happy. Additionally, having no issues with my mother-in-law was a major plus. My husband's parents' house was just a 10-minute walk from our apartment. When I found out, I was worried they would come over often and harass me, but that was nothing to worry about. My in-laws were very kind people. Even when I just asked a simple question, they would come over to our house to teach me kindly and patiently. They never complained about me not being able to have children early in our marriage. And my mother-in-law would say, "I love you more than any grandchild. I've always wanted a daughter since I only had men in this house except me. Please let me continue to love you like my own daughter." I was happy to hear this. I loved my mother-in-law so much, and though my father-in-law spoke little, I trusted him as well. However, this warm relationship only lasted the first few years. As the years passed since our marriage, the once kind attitude of my in-laws gradually changed. My father-in-law became even quieter, and my mother-in-law changed so drastically, I almost wondered if she had a dual personality. In fact, this side might have been her true nature. To describe how much she changed, if I say it went from plus 100 to minus 100, it might be easy to understand. Nowadays, my mother-in-law has become harsh towards me. Living nearby, she frequently visits our house when my husband is not around to nag me. Again and again, she pressures me by saying, "Show me the face of my grandchild soon. Isn't that the duty of a daughter-in-law?" Urging me to have a child as soon as possible. She used to say, "Children are gifts from heaven. You don't have to try hard. When the time comes, you'll naturally conceive, so don't rush it." Furthermore, my mother-in-law would bring up other families saying, "I heard the family next door just had a baby. The lady next door is pregnant too. And what about you?" Pressuring me repeatedly. But no matter how much my mother-in-law pushes for grandchildren, it's meaningless if my husband isn't willing. Initially, my husband wanted children, but a year into our marriage, he lost interest. Even if I tried to initiate, he would reject me saying, "I'm tired, maybe next time," or "Don't disturb my gaming." Even when I discussed this with my mother-in-law, she wouldn't understand, constantly badgering me about having children, and my stress built up day by day. Unable to withstand the onslaught from my mother-in-law, I discussed with my husband how difficult she was making it for me. Then my husband said, "I think there's no rush," but he agreed to try to increase our intimacy as much as possible. We kept trying as a couple, but no matter how long we waited, I couldn't get pregnant. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law kept saying things like, "It's because you're not trying hard enough. My son has done nothing wrong." I even wondered if the stress caused by my mother-in-law was making it harder for me to get pregnant. Unable to withstand the pressure from my mother-in-law any longer, we finally decided to start fertility treatments. I thought this would give me peace of mind, but then another problem arose that troubled me. It was about my husband. Since we started the fertility treatments, he began to treat me coldly. And gradually, even when he came home from work, he would just seclude himself in his room and play games or ignore me when I spoke to him. It would have been bearable if it were just that, but he would lose his temper over how I spent money. even if it was just a little on my hobby of crafting supplies. And if something happened at work, he would take out his stress on me, lashing out. When I argued back, my husband would quickly lose his temper and say, "Do you even realize that you have to think for your living, you jobless wife?" and go back to his selfish behavior. I told him I quit my job because he wanted me to, but he wouldn't listen. One day, after enduring such days, when he should have been at work, my husband was at home playing games. "Don't you have work today?" I asked, and he replied, "I quit." He said he had quit his job without telling me. Shocked, I asked why he quit, but he only got angry and said, "It's my choice." Disgusted with his unreasonable attitude, but realizing nothing could be done about his resignation, I thought to myself that we'd be all right for a while, with unemployment benefits and dipping into our savings. So I didn't panic. However, I started feeling stress about his apparent lack of intent to find new employment. Having quit his job, my husband would spend all day at home. I wish he would go out sometimes, but his hobby was gaming. Except for going to the store to buy cigarettes, he was always at home playing games. The time we spent around each other had significantly increased compared to when he was working. If it had been the beginning of our relationship, I might have seen it positively, as more time to be affectionate, but now it was different. The longer the time spent with my husband, who had gone from plus 100 to minus 100, just like my mother-in-law, the more arguments we had. Gradually, we realized that just having a conversation was stressful, and we hardly spoke anymore. Is there even a point in continuing this marriage? I started feeling like I was reaching my limit with our marriage. I wanted to find a way out of this situation. One day, as my husband was playing games at home as usual, I finally snapped. "You're not a child. Stop playing games all the time. Find a job for once." Then my husband said, "Actually, Mom told me that if you can't have children, then I should get a divorce." At that moment, I was thankful to my mother-in-law. I never thought she'd assist me like this. Moreover, I was pregnant. I found out at a checkup today and was planning to tell him tonight. But not telling him turned out to be the right decision. Now I could just say goodbye to my husband and his mother. I said, "All right, understood. Here's the divorce paper." Pulling out a pre-filled divorce form from the drawer, I handed it to my husband. He hadn't expected me to agree to the divorce, let alone have the form ready, and when he saw the divorce form, he just froze and blurted out, "What?" His usual domineering attitude was nowhere to be seen. He looked so dumbfounded. While he seemed to want to say something, convinced that he had to listen to his mother, he signed the divorce form without hesitation. He kept glancing over at me while signing. After we signed the divorce form, we planned to meet later to discuss the division of property. But there was hardly any property to worry about dividing. In truth, my husband had spent a lot on his hobbies. Not just at home gaming, but also blowing quite a bit of money at arcades. He had complained about how I spent money before, but in reality, his spending was far more reckless than mine. He had no concept of saving. Since he had never saved any money even before our marriage, we had no savings accumulated during our marriage. Realizing there was no property to divide, I thought that was the end of our discussions, but my husband said we weren't done yet. He pointed to the drawer where we kept our bank account information and said, "Don't we still have our savings?" Indeed, that bank account had a substantial amount of savings, and he insisted on dividing it. But those savings were not subject to division. Those are my savings, made before our marriage, so they're not eligible for property division. As I explained this, my husband's face turned pale. Yet he said, "Oh, this apartment should be subject to property division, right? I lived here too, after all." To that, I had to reveal the harsh truth. Unfortunately, the apartment is in my name, so you have no rights to it. Furthermore, I've already put the apartment up for sale, so you can't live here anymore. It'll be troublesome, so please leave as soon as you can, I said with a smile. I had been saving for a home, thinking that this apartment would become too cramped for us in the future. Before marrying, saving was my hobby. and even as a regular office worker, I had managed to save quite a bit. With those savings, I had purchased an apartment during my single years, so I did have some assets. If I sold the apartment, I could even afford to build a nice house in the city center. Of course, all those assets were from my single years and not subject to this property division. It seems my husband didn't know that. He had thought he would get half of my assets, but unfortunately for him, that wasn't the case. My husband became distraught upon learning that they weren't part of the property division. After that, we continued discussing, but my husband couldn't snap out of his daze. Since there wasn't much else to talk about, the discussions ended quickly, and we submitted the divorce papers to the office. And so, our divorce was finalized smoothly. Several months later, I went back to my parents' home and, with their support, safely gave birth to a child. It was a healthy boy. His name is Tyler. Now I spend fulfilling days with my parents and my beloved child. Of course, I haven't told my ex-husband and his family. If I did, my former mother-in-law would surely storm in demanding to give her grandchild back. My husband, who was kicked out of the apartment, returned to his parents' home, but became reclusive after I easily accepted the divorce. Even when he goes out occasionally, his appearance is so suspicious that he frequently gets stopped by police. It's truly pitiful. I later heard that the reason he quit his job was due to complications in his interpersonal relationships. Apparently, he had a foul mouth at work and was disliked especially by female colleagues, and eventually he was ignored by everyone. Unable to withstand such a situation, he suddenly quit his job one day. Perhaps he was that kind of person even before we got married. The kindness was only in front of me. What a truly deceptive man. 3 years later, I am working as a manager of a craft store. When I became a regular at the local craft store, the owner approached me. "I'm thinking of retiring soon. Anna, would you like to take over the store?" I had been thinking about acquiring a skill or a job since I had quite a lot of free time, since my parents were actively helping with childcare. And if I refused, the store would have to close, which would trouble many of the other regular customers. With that in mind, I decided to take over the store. While I was tending to an occasional regular, an unexpected, rare visitor came to see me. It was my former mother-in-law and ex-husband. "Huh, this is quite the nice shop you have." "Yeah, oh look, this fabric would definitely suit you." Disgusted by their transparent flattery, I asked, "What are you here for?" Then my former mother-in-law said, "Give me my grandchild back." It seems she had somehow found out I had a child and wanted to make him the heir of their family. "You were already pregnant when I asked for divorce. Why did you keep it from us? If I had known, I wouldn't have divorced you." My ex-husband began to blame me. "It's obvious. I wanted the divorce. If you had known about the pregnancy, you would have done anything to stop the divorce." I glared at my ex-husband and former mother-in-law. Then my former mother-in-law said, "So, are you going to give me back my grandchild or not? I want to live with my grandson soon. You've had enough, right? You've had 3 years together, now give him to me." Another nonsensical statement. As I was dumbfounded by this, I heard a voice from behind me. "What's wrong? Is there trouble?" My parents and Tyler appeared. It seemed they were alerted by a regular customer and came rushing over. Seeing Tyler holding hands with my parents, my former mother-in-law exclaimed, "Oh, how cute! He looks just like my son when he was a child. Hello, sweetie, I'm your grandmother." She tried to approach Tyler. I was about to stop her, but there was no need. Tyler said, "My grandma is my only grandma," and hugged my mother. "Now we know who his grandmother is. Can you please leave now?" My mother asked my former mother-in-law. "Just give my mom the kid," my ex-husband demanded, and tried to forcibly take Tyler from my parents. I stood in front of my ex-husband to protect Tyler, but I was no match for a grown man and was easily knocked aside. "Tyler, be careful!" My ex-husband was inches away from grabbing Tyler's arm when suddenly, his body flew through the air. "What?" Looking up, there was my father. having just thrown my ex-husband with a back throw. My father, who is a police officer and was skilled enough in karate to compete in competitions during his school days, had thrown my ex-husband just in time. Completely unaware of this, my ex-husband couldn't utter a word due to the pain, and just looked at my father with a pathetic face.
"Well, if you continue to bother my child or grandchild, I will take further action. Would you like to continue?"
As he showed his police badge to my former mother-in-law, she turned pale and grabbed my ex-husband's hand and fled out. I don't know what became of my former mother-in-law and ex-husband after that. Of course, I don't even want to know, though. A few years later, Tyler, inspired by my father, began aspiring to be a police officer. "When I grow up, I'll be a police officer too, so I can protect you," he said, and diligently studied to become one. He learns karate from my father and is considered unbeatable from his age. I plan to continue watching over my son and cherish my life with my parents and him.
After giving birth, my husband left with few words. He then accused me of paternity fraud. Humiliated in front of my parents, I lost it.
I'm Jasmine. I'm a 36-year-old full-time housewife. I've been married to Carl, who used to be my colleague, for 3 years. I resigned from my job when I became pregnant, eagerly anticipating this moment. Currently, I'm on an extended stay at my parents' house. The reason is that my parents' home is quite far, and traveling back during the final months of pregnancy would be difficult. Additionally, my husband is on a year-long business trip, which complicates things further. Discovering my pregnancy and my husband's decision for a long-term business trip coincided almost perfectly. I felt bitter towards the company for making such decisions at such a time, but realistically, I couldn't refuse.
Having your parents nearby would be reassuring in case of emergencies. It might be a good idea to return to your parents' home early as a precaution, don't you think?
Following the gentle recommendation of my caring husband, who worries about my health and the baby, I returned to my parents' home with our cat Mike, just after reaching 6 months of pregnancy. During our time apart, communication between us mainly happens through WhatsApp video calls. What a wonderful era we live in. Hey there.
Jasmine, how are you feeling? Is the baby doing well?
We're both doing great, and Mike is doing well too. When I lift Mike up high enough for him to appear on the screen, he greets with a meow.
Oh wow, Mike, you've gotten so used to it over there.
I communicate with him using Mike's tone of voice. I've totally gotten used to it. Meow. Both Grandpa and Grandma are head over heels for me now. Meow. But that friendly conversation only lasted for a while after returning to my parents' home. As days went by, my husband's reactions gradually became colder.
Sorry, I'm just tired today. It must be nice and easy over there. While here, I'm working in an unfamiliar environment every day.
Eventually, when I tried to initiate video calls, I was often turned down because he was busy and the frequency decreased. Carl, I wonder if his work is really tough. Should I go and check on him? But if something were to happen, while I, being pregnant, am far away, it would be troublesome. And Carl doesn't seem to want me to come either. I was feeling anxious about my husband's changes, but I couldn't come up with any good ideas as what to do about it. As I spent those days, I reached full term and labor finally began. Accompanied by my mother and driven by my father, we headed to the hospital. However, giving birth was an incredibly difficult ordeal. I endured weak contractions for a staggering 17 hours until finally, my son was born, and by then, I was utterly exhausted. But thanks to the lengthy labor, my husband, who had been contacted by my parents, made it to the hospital in time for the birth. While the prolonged labor was tough, that was one good thing about it. Yet, despite the joyous occasion of a safe delivery for both mother and child, my husband's reaction was unexpected. The midwife gently wiped the newborn baby clean and said, "All right, Dad, please hold the baby." Trying to get my husband to hold the baby, the midwife encouraged him. But he made no move to do so,
and instead kept avoiding eye contact, focused on his notes.
Huh.
The midwife, flustered by the baby's cries, looked around anxiously. I couldn't understand why my husband was behaving like this. Of course, my parents were also bewildered. "What's wrong, Carl?" When I asked my husband, he said something unbelievable.
It turns out he wasn't my child after all.
Huh?
You were doing paternity fraud. I knew it.
Paternity fraud? What on earth was my husband talking about? I know about paternity fraud, where a cuckoo lays its eggs in the nest of another bird species and gets the host to incubate its eggs. But why would he suddenly mention such a thing? What are you talking about? What's paternity fraud?
You must be mistaken about something. Why?
Stop lying. The kid is the ultimate proof.
My husband cut me off and shouted.
All women are like that. They think men are clueless and they can just deceive them with a straight face. I knew about the paternity fraud, but still decided to go through with the childbirth. Be ready to pay up for it.
Without even heeding my parents' attempts to stop him, my husband abruptly stormed out of the hospital room. Both my parents and I, as well as the doctors and midwives, were left dumbfounded by my husband's sudden behavior. But being accused of scheming in public was far from just a moment of shock. I was confused, and my parents were outraged by my husband's attitude. There was no joy in childbirth. And to make matters worse, after giving birth, terrible rumors spread around the hospital that I was the woman who had cheated on her husband and gave birth to her lover's child through paternity fraud. The doctors and midwives who were in the delivery room remained silent, but it seemed that other pregnant women in neighboring rooms overheard the commotion through the curtains and spread it to the other moms in the same ward. "So, Jasmine from room 702 is the lucky one who cheated with someone, huh? Wow, is that what paternity fraud means? That's awful. Seems like her husband found out about the paternity fraud and got mad and left." During meals in the lunchroom, and even during bathing instructions, I felt the piercing stares of the other moms around me. Due to unfounded suspicions of paternity fraud, I was humiliated, and what should have been a joyous time was completely ruined. After that, it seems my husband quickly returned to his business trip, as I couldn't reach him at home by phone. He wouldn't pick up his smartphone, nor would he respond to WhatsApp messages. Feeling frustrated, I spent my days in the hospital, eagerly awaiting permission to leave, and as soon as I got the go-ahead for discharge on the third try, I fled the hospital as if escaping. Even after returning home, I attempted to contact my husband countless times. However, he continued to ignore calls and messages both on the phone and on WhatsApp. Finally, my husband picked up the phone a week after my discharge, but by then, I had grown somewhat stubborn.
Ugh, seriously? Enough already.
As soon as he answered the phone, my husband was like this. "What do you mean by enough already? It's because you don't pick up the phone. Being humiliated in front of my parents with unbelievable lies at the hospital, and enduring the needle of shame until discharged. It's just..."
Yeah, I got it.
My husband cut me off.
I was planning to discuss divorce once you were discharged.
Wait, divorce?
Just so you know, even if you try to return from your parents' home to ours, you won't have a place to come back to. I had a locksmith come over and change the locks at the home the other day, and a senior colleague at work referred me to a lawyer. The lawyer will be sending you a certified letter about seeking compensation. As for the rest, communicate through the lawyer. I have no intention of ever seeing you again.
After unloading his one-sided rant, my husband hung up without listening to my side. What's going on? I had been hoping to clarify any misunderstandings, but I was completely enraged by now. He didn't even bother to listen to me, just accused me of cheating and scheming, and demanded divorce and compensation. I've had enough. If he wants a divorce, then fine, I'll give it to him. I have nothing to hide, and I'll make sure to clarify who's right. Confident in my actions and feelings, I made up my mind firmly. After a while, I received a call from the lawyer. I passed the stage of being shaken up. Listening to the lawyer's words calmly, I made just one condition.
Please come here with your husband.
We'll discuss the future at my parents' house. If that's not acceptable, then I won't agree to the divorce. The fact that I didn't make excuses or get defensive seemed unexpected to the lawyer. It seems the lawyer also thought that we should have a proper discussion.
I'll convey that to Carl.
With that, the lawyer hung up. That night, I received a WhatsApp message from my husband.
I'll bring the lawyer and come over there this Saturday at 1 p.m. The lawyer is too persistent, so I've decided to meet you just this once.
It seems my husband agreed to the lawyer's persuasion. If you're coming, come this Saturday at 1 p.m. I'll deny that ridiculous misunderstanding and even deny your existence. Screaming in my mind, I began preparing for the showdown on Saturday. When Saturday at 1 p.m. arrived, my husband and the lawyer showed up as promised. But as usual, my husband didn't even try to see our son. Perhaps because he still believed the child wasn't his. Instead, I tried to pet Mike's head, but he hissed and growled at my husband. It seems Mike has instinctively labeled my husband as my enemy. He's quite a reliable cat. It was worth upgrading to better cat food since coming to my parents' house.
I'm the lawyer, Terry. This time it's about your divorce with Carl.
Hold on, I interrupted the lawyer. You see, my husband seems to think that I've engaged in paternity fraud, but I have absolutely no memory of such a thing. Is there evidence I was cheating? If so, please show it. Then my husband smirked.
The evidence is right here. That child, who looks nothing like me, is proof. Also, when I arrived at the hospital, your face turned pale. You knew your scheme was exposed, so you turned pale, right?
As expected, I sighed. You see, when you arrived at the hospital, I had just given birth after 17 hours of labor. I was exhausted and dizzy from the long labor and frequent contractions, so it's natural my complexion was bad.
Huh?
And look closely at the baby's face. You barely even looked at the baby's face right after birth, so you wouldn't know. Does it not look exactly like you? I held the baby, who had been lying in the crib, and I showed its face to my husband and the lawyer. Exactly alike. A baby with the exact same face as my husband. It's so identical, it's like a mini clone.
Huh? Huh? Why?
Seeing a baby just like himself, my husband was confused.
But the baby I saw at the hospital had a completely different face. Did you swap the baby?
What's he going to say next? How could I switch babies? Where would I even find one with the same face? My husband is terribly confused.
But, when I saw it at the hospital, the face was all red.
All newborn babies are red. That's why they're called newborns. That's how all of them are.
Well, and it was wrinkled.
That's also the same for all of them.
But at that time, the head and the face were much longer. It had a completely different face.
That's what I'm saying. At that time, my labor wasn't progressing, so I had to have vacuum-assisted delivery. Didn't the obstetrician explain? They said the head was misshapen because of the vacuum, but it will gradually return to normal. Finally realizing his own misunderstanding, my husband slumped his shoulders in disappointment. Listening to my husband's story, it seems he had been influenced by single men on online forums during his long business trips, filling his mind with inappropriate thoughts. At their suggestion, he started reading certain forums and began to believe that women cheat or use surrogate eggs. And when he saw the baby that was born, there was a baby with a completely different face from mine. He thought it was a surrogate egg, so he says. I feel more disappointed that I was suspected of plotting with such a silly misunderstanding. My parents had angry faces, as if they were about to scold my husband, but since I asked them in advance to listen quietly, they remained silent. I figured as much. So what, can I assume that seeing the child's face clears me of these false accusations? If you continue to doubt, we can do a DNA test, or whatever you want.
Well, it doesn't have to go that far.
Oh, I see. Then let's discuss divorce again. I calmly proceeded with the matter. I'm not at fault for the divorce, so of course there won't be any compensation. But for the defamation and humiliation I've endured, due to your suspicions, I'll be seeking compensation.
Huh?
I'll be taking half of the assets precisely. And regarding child support?
Well, maybe divorce isn't really necessary anymore, since it's my child.
Huh. After you've been suspecting and accusing me, now you're saying what?
I'm really sorry about that point. I'm reflecting on it. I really am.
At that moment, the lawyer interjected.
Please, wait a moment.
Huh? What is it, lawyer? No matter what you say, my intention for divorce won't change.
No, that's not it. It's about the compensation claim from you to Carl.
Huh?
It seems it might be appropriate to add compensation for Carl's infidelity as well.
What?
What?
I was surprised, but even more surprised was my husband. I wondered what the lawyer was suddenly suggesting.
Actually, a friend introduced me, saying my subordinate is having trouble with infidelity, and mentioned Carl. After hearing the story, I indeed thought it was a divorce case and accepted the request. But the friend who introduced me to Carl said he's also cheating, so they're both at fault, in our conversation. I recommend investigating further. Huh? You're my lawyer, right? Why are you bringing up unfavorable things to me?
When his own affair was exposed, my husband panicked.
After being treated like this, I can't handle it anymore. I'll withdraw. Termination of the contract. No, the contract is invalid. Since you haven't transferred the initial fee yet. I was willing to be lenient on the delay in payment due to it being a friend's subordinate, but that's also why I lost trust in you. This can't be.
So basically, my husband thought it would be more convenient if I were also cheating, because then it would be easier for him to justify his own infidelity. So then, if my affair were seen as the cause, it would be grounds for divorce. So you pinned unthinkable schemes on me. My husband's face grew paler and paler, as if it hit the nail on the head.
While the client's own affair is morally reprehensible, I've kept silent to protect the client. But I didn't realize that not only was he hiding his own affair, but even his divorce's affair was a lie.
The lawyer was furious, his pride shattered. The fact that this attorney no longer has power of attorney with my husband means. I approached the lawyer to talk. Oh, then will you listen to my concerns this time? Actually, I'm considering divorce now. I want to take as much money as possible for my partner. When I said this with a mischievous smile, the lawyer laughed with a similar expression.
Since I haven't formally terminated the contract with the current client, I can't answer here. But please come to my law firm later. Let's talk then.
In other words, it's okay. I was satisfied. Suddenly, my husband got down on his knees.
I'm sorry. It's all my fault. So please don't divorce me. I beg you.
Instead of responding to my husband, I addressed Mike. Is that so? What do you think, Mike? And I responded in Mike's tone of voice.
There's no way I can forgive them. Meow. This kind of person deserves a punishment. Meow. I'll scratch them and give them a cat punch until they're all scratched up and torn apart. Meow.
Eek.
When I pretended to brush off a branch, my husband panicked and ran off. After that, we got divorced. The lawyer not only secured a substantial settlement for property division, but also for adultery and defamation of my character. Of course, I have custody of our son, and we've settled child support. It seems my husband's affair was with a young woman from his long-term business trip, who apparently ended up quitting her job due to the rumors. Even though my husband's trip isn't over yet, everyone at his destination knows about the incident, so it's like walking on eggshells. Can you believe my husband even fell for that nonsense about paternity fraud on some forum? In the end, I was mocked by the single guy who planted the idea of cuckoldry in my husband's mind, saying, "Huh? Did you seriously believe that post on the bulletin board? Wow, that's unbelievable. I was just teasing a bit. I'm sure you're eager to return to headquarters as soon as possible, but unfortunately, even after the business trip ends, my husband's seat at headquarters will be vacant. I heard from my former colleague that once the current long-term business trip is over, my husband will be immediately assigned to another long-term trip. Furthermore, this time, it's to a remote countryside branch office, essentially being exiled. All I can think is, serves him right. After the divorce, I moved back to my parents' house for good. Now I'm busy with childcare every day with my mother's help. Once things settle down, I plan to look for a job. I'm determined to shower my son with double the love, filling in for his father. With Mike the cat also doting on my son, it feels like we have 2.5 caretakers in total, doesn't it? Well, sort of. When I glanced at Mike, he seemed to wink while washing his face with his front paws.